Be strong.
Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Masked Gaming, my first ever video, so thank you very much for you guys tuning in and watching the video. I'm very glad to be able to do this. I'm currently on the PTS. I am using a controller, so if anything I explain seems confusing to you PC players, just try and translate it over because I'm not too familiar with PC interface. As for Xbox and PlayStation 4 players, I'm happy to say that you guys will be able to understand the build very easily. This is the first of many build videos. I have a good 10 or 11 videos lined up in the future, and I plan to share them with you all over the next coming weeks. Probably aiming to do a video every now and again. So stay tuned and you'll be able to see what we're doing. So today we're on the Stamina Nightblade. Now the Stamina Nightblade is something that has been looked down upon for the last couple of years. Ever since they got that massive nerf in PvE, people have been looking at Stamina Nightblades as if they're sort of the runt of the litter. However, in PvP, they are very, very close to S tier classes. Now here's why. As you can see in my stats, my max health and my max stam doesn't look too impressive. 19k health, 26k max stam. Not too impressive, but then again, that is what the average Stamina Dragon Knight runs. Stam recovery is currently sitting at a nice and tidy 1.2k. That means we can get our resources back nice and easily. We're running 4k weapon damage with 43% weapon critical, allowing me to be able to burst out that damage and be able to focus on continuing to do damage with my resource recovery and my critical, enabling me to run more tanky setups while dishing out raw damage. Now, as you can see, my resistances, I've got 17,042 spell resistance, and I've got 15,142 physical resistance. This is a nice number for a stamina build. Stam builds are quite squishy, but they can be very, very tanky. There's not really much of a balance. This build achieves a balance that is such that you're able to do damage and stay alive. My crit resist is sitting at a nice and tidy 2.8k thanks to the base resistances that we got in the most recent patch. The critical resist of 2.8k is nice to have without actually running any impenetrable trait armor. Now, as you can see here, we're running 64 stamina. 64 stamina means that we can scale our weapon damage up higher. We don't really need much health on account for the fact that we are an orc. If you have a look here, we are running Artaeum Takeaway Broth. This is basically a bi-stat recovery food, increasing my max health by 3,000, my max stamina by 2.6, and my health and stam recovery by a nice chunky amount, allowing me to continue to unleash the barrage of damage. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner of my screen, of your screen, whichever way you want to look at it, you will see gameplay of me dueling my very dear friend and a very good player, Not AK. He is a very good Stamsork. He's recently come back to playing Stamsork after taking about a couple of years break from it, and he's a very experienced player. You will see me die every now and again because at the end of the day, not every build is perfect. We're both playing on the PTS, so for sake of testing, we both have access to the exact same setups. No skill is required to get these gear. We're running the Shadow Mundus. Now, the Shadow Mundus is quite a nasty one. We're running full Divines, as I'll explain later on in the video. Shadow is very nice because that increases our critical hit damage by 19%. That means that ties in with our 44% weapon critical. We have a 44% chance to do not just critical damage, but 19% more. Now that is a nice big chunk of raw damage. We have a base major savagery here, increasing my crit chance by 10%. That comes from the skills, which I will explain very shortly. Now, let's head into the armour. We're running quite an unorthodox setup. We're running double crafted. Now, double crafted is something that you don't really see in many builds nowadays, unless you're going for something really tanky. We've got a stuns maul in Nirnhound, fully golded out, and we're running double dot poisons. Double dot poisons are quite strong because it adds an extra 2.4k sort of a dot for those 4.3 seconds. Now that is quite strong. That means in total, by the time that the effect ends, they're taking about an extra 3k damage, and it's increasing the cost of their stam abilities. It drains their stamina, and you're able to do more with your attacks. On the back bar, we're running a Master's Perfected Bow with a weapon damage enchantment. That's because you start off your rotation with the Master's Bow to trigger the weapon damage enchant and just have that Nirnhound so that those abilities that you're casting do have a little bit more strength. Masters is nice because Poison Inject increases your weapon damage against certain targets by 330. Nice and strong, plus with a base weapon damage increase, this makes this weapon very viable on the back bar. We're running full Divines. As showed before, we're running a heavy Belorg helmet. Belorg adds a nice weapon and spell damage buff, meaning our magicka heals are a little bit stronger, and of course our stamina abilities are 129 weapon damage stronger. We're running full Divines and a max health enchant, just to get an extra bit of health, because our stam doesn't really need to go up any higher than it is. On the chest piece, we're running a heavy stuns cuirass in full Divines. Now you notice I haven't actually got a stamina enchant on this. That's because I haven't actually got round to doing it. The difference between having the enchants is an extra 1600 stamina, so my build could be even stronger. I just accidentally messed up and lost access to my materials in the PTS. So that's where I'm lacking in materials. Then again, we're running a heavy stuns shoulder piece. Again, missing an enchantment. I ran out of materials. Full Divines, all gold, extra damage. Now stuns is very, very nice. 2-piece adds weapon and spell damage. 3-piece adds 1.5k physical and spell pen. 4-piece adds another weapon and spell damage, and 5-piece is the all-important. When you deal damage to an enemy who is off balance, your physical and spell penetration is increased by 5.3k for 10 seconds. And you'll see how that ties in later on in the video. We're running a New Moon's Acolyte belt in Divines. New Moon's Acolyte, if you're not familiar, adds weapon critical and spell critical, spell damage and weapon damage, physical and spell pen, and 481 weapon and spell damage. However, it increases the cost of your active abilities by 5%. We're running a medium New Moon's Acolyte gloves. Again, Divines. Stuns heavy legs in Divines. And we're running New Moon Acolyte boots in Divines. Now, you may notice that I'm running 4 pieces of heavy and 3 pieces of medium. Strange. No, I'm not. I'm running 3 pieces of heavy, 4 pieces of medium. However, I'm running this because, as you saw earlier in the video, I'm still hitting the 4000 weapon damage threshold. And as you can see in the clips below, I am still dishing out a lot of damage, and my resistances are quite high. I'm not running 5-piece heavy armor purely because the 3-piece medium allows me to utilize the weapon crit bonuses and the stamina reduction the stamina cost reduction of your abilities. So it's just got a nice balance. You don't need to hit 5-piece of either one, but if you feel comfortable with the extra max health, by all means, run the 5-piece heavy. Now, on jewelry, this is where it gets kind of unique. You'll notice we're only running 1 piece of monster set. That's because on my necklace I'm running the Talk of Tonal Constancy infused with a weapon damage glyph. The weapon damage glyph allows me to drive my damage even further, but then it also ties in with the mythical bonus. While your stamina is less than 50%, increase your magicka recovery by 450. While your magicka is less than 50%, increase your stamina recovery by 450. Now this is brilliant, because that means while we're using other abilities that drain our magicka, our stamina recovery is going way higher, allowing us to dodge roll, do more abilities, and all of that. If our stam drops below 50%, I have more magic to heal, using skills that I will show you later on. We're running 2 New Moon Acolyte gold rings in Infused with weapon damage enchants, purely because Infused seems to be where PvP is sat at right now. Infused allows you to drive your stats even further while sacrificing quite a bit of stamina, which is perfectly fine, but if that's what you don't want to do, then by all means run them in perhaps stamina, or you can even run them in Swift for the bonus speed. Ring of Wild Hunt is also a good alternative instead of the Talk of Tonal Constancy, because the Ring of the Wild Hunt will increase your speed to points where you're able to just run laps around people without them seeing you. Now, enough for the gear, we're going to go over the skills. Now, for our first ability in slot 1, we are running Surprise Attack. Now, Surprise Attack, my tooltip is currently hitting 9,400 physical damage. If you are flanking the enemy, shred through a small portion of their armour, reducing their physical resistance by 5% for 10 seconds. Attacking with Surprise Attack from the flank, meaning the sides or behind, sets them off balance. Now, setting the enemy off balance is quite key. Even if they can't be stunned, the ability still sets them off balance. That is where stuns comes in, increasing our physical penetration by another 5,600 just from doing a Surprise Attack, our main spammable. Next up, we're using Ambush. Now, this is a good gap closer, and it also applies minor vulnerability to the enemy, increasing their damage taken by 8%. And it also increases the next damage of your light attack. Now, in all your abilities, you should be light Surprise Attack, light Surprise Attack. You should always be light weaving. Light weaving increases the damage of everything you do, because it's adding just a little bit of an oomph to your main spammable. Secondly, we're using Relentless Focus. Now, Relentless Focus reduces your damage taken, essentially. It makes you a really, really tanky player. You do 5 light attacks with this active, you'll be taking 10% less damage, which is brilliant. However, when you hit those 5 light attacks, you can either choose to keep your stacks, or you can consume them and shoot something called Assassin's Scourge, which, as you can see, my tooltip is 18,000. That 18,000 translates to about 9,000 in PvP. Eventually adding the spell pen that I've got, and the increased damage when I surprise attack people, you could be hitting up to 13,000 damage on this bow proc, as it's called. And it heals you if you're very close to the enemy. So it's quite a nice burst damage. This is one of your main burst spammables. Once you've got this, you're meant to do an in-cap to then boost the damage of this. You do a Relentless Focus, and then you do a surprise attack. That takes down a good maybe 25,000 health, killing nearly anybody. I use this build on my main account on Xbox, and on Xbox I am only a 667 champion point player, and I'm killing 810s with it. This is just a higher level version with the maximum potential, and let me tell you, it destroys. Next up, we're running Camo Hunter, or Camouflaged Hunter. This skill is found in the Fighters Guild's tree line. While slotted, it gives us minus Major Savagery, increasing our weapon critical rating, as you saw earlier in the character screen. However, when you deal critical damage from an enemy's flank, again, their sides or behind, you increase your damage done by 8%. So not only have they got the 8% damage taken from your ambush, but they've also got the 8% damage done on you. Those stack, so you'll be doing even more lovely raw damage. Next up, we've got Rally. Now, Rally is our main source of Major Brutality, increasing our weapon damage by 20%. It also increases our stam recovery by 10% for 20 seconds. Now, this is ideal because our stam recovery, as you saw, is already 1.2k. That is quite a nice extra chunk. You heal for 3.6k health when Rally ends. However, it's increased for every second that it's active. If you do this on the very last second of it being active, out of the 20 seconds, you can critically heal in a PvP scenario for about 10-13k. Very strong indeed. For our ultimate, we have the Incapacitating Strike. Now, Incapacitating Strike is very, very strong, dealing 15k disease damage, making them take 20% more damage from your attacks for 6 seconds. However, if you cast it with 120 or more ultimate, it turns into a stun. So when you cast it, they fall to the ground, allowing you to do even more damage while they can just stay there and lie there. And finally on this, you have while slotted, you gain Reeve. Now Reeve restores 100 mag and stam when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack to an enemy with a negative effect on them. With our double dot poisons and our teleport strike, our ambush, they constantly have a negative effect on them. You are constantly getting more sustain. Now on our back bar, starting from back to front now, we are starting off with Vigour. Now my Vigour has a tooltip of 14.6k, healing me over 4 seconds. That's a very, 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 very strong heal, and it's a must for nearly every stam build. Next up we've got Leeching Strikes. Now Leeching Strikes increases your sustain by a lot. Light attacks heal you for 1.4k and restore 100 stamina. But when the effect ends, you restore another 4.2k stam. So it's very, very nice for sustain. Next up we have Dark Cloak. Now this is quite a nice heal. It reduces our damage taken by 8% for 8 seconds, which is brilliant. And it heals you for 1.2k health every second for 8 seconds. Now in PvP this translates to about 600-700 per tick, but that's a nice extra buff to have the 8% reduced damage taken. Next up we've got Shadow Image. Now Shadow Image is basically just that little shade that you just place down on the ground and teleport to. However, what this shade also does is it shoots the target, reducing their damage done to you by 15%. That means your target has constantly got a debuff on them that makes it so they do less damage to you. And finally we have Poison Inject. Now Poison Injection is very nice. It's an execute. Plus as well, it also triggers our Master's Bow, buffing our spell damage by another 330 to that target. Now that is ideal, because we're not running the full medium setup, we're not driving our weapon damage as high as possible, so we need to compensate for that, allowing our build to be more flexible for our use of heavy armor. Now, on my front bar, you'll notice, and my back bar, you'll notice I'm not running invisible or cloak. Now going invisible, I believe, for a stam blade is kind of the wrong way to play it. By all means, run it on a snipe build. However, going invisible, while it also increases your damage done, it makes you very, very vulnerable. If someone finds you, that means your main source of getting away is gone. Next up we have Executioner on the passives. When an enemy dies, you're restoring mag or stam. Ideally stam in this scenario. So all these abilities that we're doing to hit an enemy with, we're getting mag and stam back whenever we kill them. Next passive is increases our weapon and spell critical ratings for each assassin ability slotted. We have an extra 1.3k spell critical rating because we have those abilities on our front bar, and that is brilliant. And also finally for this skill line, we're running an assassin ability on our bar purely because of the extra 10% critical damage, stacked on top of our Shadow Mundus, meaning we are totaling at about 29% bonus critical damage, which is very, very good. Plus as well, dealing critical damage grants me more weapon critical for 20 seconds. Now near every 1 in 2 of my attacks are critical damage. So, I'm getting more critical rating to keep on doing more and more damage. Now in the Shadow skill line, it increases our mag, health and stam recovery by 15%. Very nice, more recoveries. Casting a Shadow ability grants you major resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance. Basically meaning that I now have 12 seconds worth of physical and spell resistance boosting by 5k. Just by casting Dark Cloak or Surprise Attack. Surprise Attack is in the Shadow skill line, so casting these abilities will increase my resistances and make me even tankier. Running heavy armor increases the duration of this effect, meaning I'm getting it for 12 seconds as opposed to the usual 6. This is quite a nice resistance booster. It also increases my max health by 3% per shadow ability slotted. I only have one shadow ability slotted on this build, so I'm only getting 3% bonus max health, but it's very nice indeed. Next up in the siphoning, after drinking a potion, you get 20 ultimate. Brilliant, amazing for sustain. Next up, we've got increased max magicka by 8% while the siphoning ability is slotted, meaning we get more max mag just from having one of these abilities on our bar. Increased healing done by 3% per siphoning ability, brilliant. And then you've got casting a siphoning ability generates 2 ultimate. This effect can occur every 4 seconds. Now, ultimate, in case you didn't notice, is part of our burst. We do our incapacitation strike, and then you hit them with other abilities, and then that burst goes from there. That is the whole point of getting ultimate, because our ultimate allows us to push that burst even further. We're running a two-handed weapon, so we're running a maul purely because, as you can see in the heavy weapons passive, maces cause your attacks to ignore 20% of your target's physical resistance, basically meaning you get whatever their resistances are, that in pen, 20% of it. If they're running 30,000 resistances, that means you are getting 6,000 bonus pen just from using a mace. With this build, your targets will have barely any resistances left to fight you with, which is what I like about this build, because any build, no matter how tanky they think they are, will still take a lot of damage. Now, as you can see, I'm just alone in this house, my Hunter's Glade, with my Munda Stones around. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys the champion points. Now, to start off with the tower, we have 23 in Warlord and 2 in Sprinter. Break 3 is quite important, especially when going against other builds that are just like me, because I'm being stunned quite a lot. Next up, we have 100 in Mooncalf. Now, 100 in Mooncalf is key because it boosts our stam recovery. We don't have much in Tenacity because as a stam blade we don't have much time to heavy attack, but it's still just a nice boost. Next up, we have 48 in Tumbling and 48 in Shadow Ward. Blocking is quite important, and so is roll dodging, especially as a flexible heavy armor build. You need to be able to get out of there. So, running Tumbling and Shadow Ward has been quite favourable in fights. We have nothing in the Apprentice. In the action arc, we have 64 Master at Arms and 13 Physical Weapon Expert because we're constantly light attacking in between our attacks. You want to boost the damage as much as possible in all aspects of your DPS. Next up, we have 20 points in Thaumaturge, 56 points in Precise Strikes, 61 in Piercing, and 56 in Mighty. Now, Mighty and Piercing are quite important. Mighty because everything we do is physical or disease, and Piercing because that is extra pen. Stacked up with everything else we have, we're hitting about the border of... what's the numbers? I'd say about 15,000 pen. With stuns triggered and everything. Very scary numbers. And critical damage is a must. Having an extra 20% critical hit damage, plus the Shadow Mundus, plus the fact that we're a Nightblade, we're hitting a border of about 49% increased critical hit damage. Now in the Steed, we have 50 in Ironclad, 20 in Spell Shield, 70 in Resistant, to drive our crit resistance up even higher. We have 55 in Hardy, 55 in Elemental Defender, and 20 in Thick-Skinned. Thick-Skinned isn't as important in PvP unless you know you're going up against a Magicka DK damage over time build. Those do exist, sadly. They seem to be back, which I might do a build video on in the future. And we have nothing in the Lord. Now, let me just put down a Atronach. I currently don't have anyone to physically test out the damage on, So what I could do is I could show you on a trials dummy. Actually, no. A trials dummy isn't fair. Let's put down a target skeleton. Alright, so we've got our target skeleton. This is our person. Okay? Now, I'm not asking you to look at the DPS. I'm asking you to see the process. Okay? Before you go into a fight, when you start up a duel, for example, what you want to do is you want to buff up with Rally. You want to do your Merciless Resolve. Then you want to move to your back bar. Do your Leeching Strikes. Do your Cloak. Do your Shadow. And then, as soon as the fight starts, Heavy Attack, Poison Inject. Now, when you go in, he might be quite far away, your enemy. So, you Teleport Strike. And then what you do is you move around them as much as you can, just constantly peppering them with light attack, surprise attack, light attack, surprise attack, until you see that icon turn purple on the bottom. As you can see, my Merciless Resolve has procced. So when you see that, what you want to do is you want to rebuff, do a Teleport Strike, do an Incapacitating Strike, oh that went, and then do a Bow proc. It will hit very hard, and there's not much they can do about it. As you can see right here, 43,000 damage on a dummy. Translate that into PvP, they won't be taken. There you go, that's another 19k non-crit. A lot of damage to be done just from spamming a couple of abilities. Now you notice my stam isn't doing too well. So what you want to do, you want to go back onto your back bar and just spam all of your abilities. I say spam, but just try and keep your heals up, because as you can see, now our Magicka is below 50%. My stam is coming back a lot faster. I'll actually show you in the stats. Sitting at 2.1k stam recovery because of the Talk of Tonal Constancy triggering. The Talk of Tonal Constancy is a very nice thing because it adds so much sustain to you. I'm also running weapon damage pots. Weapon damage pots are a must. I would recommend the Cyrodiil ones. However, the Cyrodiil ones don't add health. So what I would recommend is you try and make maybe tri-stat pots to increase your mag and your stam. Or you continue using just weapon damage, weapon critical, and stam regain pots. That is honestly one of the best ways you can run this build if you feel like you are comfortable with not running a healing pot. As you can see here, this is a dummy. This is not designed for PvE at all. I'm hitting 30k surprise attacks. Now I know that doesn't translate into much because this target skeleton probably doesn't have much resistances. However, that's not the point. You can see the raw damage that this build can do and how much damage it does. There we go, 46,000 bow proc. Now this build you may notice is running a lack of an execute, but as you can see in the bottom right hand corner with my gameplay over there, you'll see that I don't need an execute. It's just constant barrage of damage. Having that constant damage allows you to maintain that flexibility, as we were talking about earlier, by running heavy armor. Running the heavy armor allows us to be even tankier and allow us to go through and do a lot of damage. See there, I just hit 17k DPS just from spamming random abilities. I wasn't doing a proper rotation. That is why I like Stamina Nightblade so much. People believe you need to be squishy with a Stamina Nightblade. However, that's never the case. You can see in my stats that I'm currently running quite a lot of resistances, but just by doing my main spammable, my resistances go up. I now go to 22k spell resistance and 20,000 physical, while maintaining that 4k spell weapon damage. And then buff up again. I'm now sitting at 4.7k weapon damage, 50% weapon critical, and those high resistances. Now, if that's not a broken build, I'm not too sure what is. This build will work against most players. Even at a low level, Stamina Nightblades can be very good. They're quite good for learning the basis of PvP. I do apologise for my lack of Battlegrounds gameplay. I will be getting more of that in the next videos. I just couldn't find any matches on the time frame that I set myself. But yes, this has been the video, guys. I'm very thankful for you guys watching all the way through. Please leave a like and subscribe. This is my very first video, and I hope it is the first of many to come. Please continue to show your support, and don't be afraid to message me on the Discord link in the description. I will